Captain Jake Morrison stood firmly on the bridge of the USS Defiance, gazing at the stars displayed on the main screen. It was the year 2387, and humanity had only recently unlocked the secrets of faster-than-light travel. The Defiance wasn't the largest or most powerful vessel in the fleet, but it was Jake's, and he took pride in it. "Captain, we're picking up strange readings," Lieutenant Amy Baker reported from the tactical station. Her tone was steady, but Jake detected an undercurrent of unease. Amy had served under him for 3 years. She didn't worry over trivialities. "What kind of readings?" Jake asked, stepping closer to her station. "Multiple ships, sir, big ones. They appeared out of nowhere, 50,000 kilometers away," she replied, her fingers deftly working the controls. "One count at least a dozen vessels, all significantly larger than us." Commander Pete Collins, the chief engineer, glanced up from his console. "Captain, these designs aren't in any of our databases. Their energy signatures are completely unfamiliar." Jake felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The Defiance was deep in the Kepler 442 system, far from Earth and any hope of reinforcement. If these newcomers were hostile, his crew of 200 would be alone. "Red alert," Jake ordered. "All hands to battle stations." Amy raised the shields and powered up the weapon systems, but refrained from targeting. "We don't want to provoke a fight we can't win," Jake cautioned. The lights dimmed, and warning alarms echoed through the ship. The crew moved efficiently, their training evident. "Incoming transmission," Captain Ensign Kelly Wright announced from communications. Fresh out of the academy, Kelly was young but capable. "It's from their largest ship." "Put it on screen," Jake ordered, straightening his uniform. The main viewer flickered, revealing a tall, elegant alien with pale blue, luminescent skin and jet-black eyes. Its voice resonated with a power that seemed to vibrate the air. "Primitive beings of the third world you call Earth," it began, the words inexplicably translated into English. "I am High Diver of the Valeri, chosen servant of the cosmic divine. You stand before celestial beings, shepherds of all life in this galaxy." Jake exchanged looks with Amy and Pete. Neither appeared intimidated, just watchful. "For 10,000 of your years we have guided lesser species toward enlightenment," the alien continued, raising a hand crackling with energy. "We are your gods, and you will worship us. You have 72 of your hours to surrender your vessel and acknowledge our divine rule. Your species will bow before the Valeri Empire, provide tribute, and serve our holy purpose. Resistance will lead to extinction." The alien gestured, and 3 human probes vanished in bursts of light. No explosion, no debris, just gone. "This is the fate of those who defy us," the alien declared, its gaze locking onto Jake. "Submit and find peace under our eternal guidance, or resist and face judgment." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in tense silence. "Well," Pete finally muttered, "that was dramatic." Amy snorted. "Gods, please, did you see how smug that thing was?" Jake nodded. Beneath the theatrics, he'd recognized something familiar: bullies, using fear to get their way. "LT Commander Hayes," Jake called, addressing his intelligence officer. "Get me everything on the Valeri, their tech, tactics, history, everything." "Already working on it," Hayes replied. "Their energy signatures suggest impressive power, but not divine origin." Captain Kelly asked hesitantly, "Should we notify?" "Earth," Jake considered. Earth was weeks away at maximum speed. By the time help arrived, it would be too late. "Send a full report," he said, "but make it clear we're not waiting for rescue." "What are your orders, sir?" Amy asked. Jake scanned the faces of his crew. They trusted him, even in the face of superior numbers and advanced technology. Surrendering or stalling might be prudent, but the Valeri's arrogance struck a nerve. "We wait," Jake decided. "We learn everything we can about these so-called gods. Then, we show them what humans do to bullies who think they're divine." Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes worked tirelessly through the night, her fingers flying across the console as streams of data flooded multiple screens. The Defiance had been intercepting Valeri communications for 18 hours, and what Lisa uncovered made her stomach churn. "Captain, you need to see this," Lisa called, as Jake entered the intelligence section. Dark circles beneath her eyes betrayed her exhaustion, but her voice was sharp with urgency. Jake sat beside her, pulling up a chair to her workstation. "What did you find?" he asked. "It's worse than we imagined, so much worse," Lisa brought up a star map highlighting the local sector. Red dots marked numerous systems. These are all systems under Valeri control. Each has at least one inhabited planet. Jake studied the display. "How many species are we talking about?" "At least 47, based on communications traffic," Lisa replied. "And, Captain, they're not just conquered. They're slaves of them." She pulled up translated message logs. "Look at this!" A transmission from the Cathmary Council to the Valeri Fleet Command. Text appeared on the screen. "Divine Shepherds. The Cathmary people offer this cycle's tribute as commanded: 2 million units of refined metals, 1 million units of processed foods, and 50,000 of our strongest workers for your holy construction projects. We live only to serve the eternal gods." Jake felt his stomach turn. 50,000 workers. "It gets worse," Lisa said grimly, pulling up another message. "This one's from the Thorac. They're asking permission to develop a medicine that could save millions from a disease." The Valeri response was chillingly brief. "The Divine will decide who lives and dies. Your request is denied. Such knowledge is not for lesser beings. They're deliberately keeping them primitive," Jake said, anger tightening his voice. "Exactly," Lisa confirmed. "Every species under their control is locked at the same technological level they had when the Valeri found them. Some have been stagnating for millennia." She showed more data. "They call themselves shepherds, but they're more like farmers harvesting resources, labor, and even lives." Commander Pete Collins joined them, coffee cup in hand, looking equally tired. "I've been analyzing their energy signatures," he said. "Their weapons are powerful, but not magical. Just extremely advanced technology." "How advanced?" Jake asked. "Maybe 1,000 years ahead of us, give or take," Pete replied. "But here's the kicker. I don't think they innovate anymore. Their tech feels ancient, like they stopped developing centuries ago." Lisa nodded. "That matches what I've seen in their communications. They've relied on the same tech and tactics for millennia. Why adapt when nothing has ever challenged them?" Jake's mind raced as he processed the implications. "What about resistance? Surely someone has tried to fight back." Lisa's expression darkened. "Oh, they have. Look at this." She brought up records of 3 species. The Valeri called these the Burned Worlds. Each one attempted rebellion. Jake's heart sank as images showed thriving civilizations reduced to lifeless, radioactive wastelands. "The next high rebelled 600 years ago," Lisa explained. "They developed weapons that could damage Valeri ships. The response was total annihilation, not just military targets, but every city, every settlement, every living thing, and the others just watched." Pete asked, appalled. "What choice did they have?" Lisa replied. "The Valeri broadcast the destruction across the galaxy as a holy lesson, a warning to all who might defy their gods." Jake stood and walked to a small window, gazing out at the stars. Somewhere out there, billions of intelligent beings lived their lives in chains, too afraid to dream of freedom. "Captain," Lisa said softly, "there's something else. I've been monitoring transmissions since the Valeri issued their ultimatum. Word is spreading about us." "What are they saying?" Jake asked, without turning. "Most think we'll surrender, just like everyone else," Lisa replied. "But some messages sound different, almost hopeful. Like they're wondering if maybe, just maybe, someone might finally say no." "How many ships do the Valeri have in the sector?" Pete checked his console. "Best guess, about 200, ranging from scouts to heavy battleships." "That's just what we've detected. Against our 1 ship," Jake said. "Against our 1 ship," Pete confirmed grimly. Lisa brought up a new display, showing human space. "Captain, if we surrender, they'll demand the same from all of humanity. Tribute, slaves, technological stagnation. They'll turn us into just another flock in their galactic herd." Jake looked again at the star map. at the red dots marking enslaved worlds. Somewhere out there, people lay awake, wondering if anyone would ever stand against their so-called gods. Lisa, Jake said at last, send a message to every species we can reach. Tell them we've received the Valeri's ultimatum. What should I say about our response? Lisa asked. Jake's mouth twisted into a grim smile. Tell them humans don't bow to false gods. Tell them some fights are worth it, even when the odds are 200 to 1. Lisa stared at him. Captain, are you sure? Jake nodded firmly. Been more sure. It's time the galaxy remembered that gods can bleed. The Defiance buzzed with activity as the 72-hour deadline neared. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the center, watching his crew ready themselves for what might be their last. Stand, every station was manned, every system checked twice. Incoming transmission from the Valeri flagship, announced Ensign Kelly Wright, her voice steady despite the tension. Put it through, Jake ordered. High Diver Zex appeared on the screen, looking even more arrogant than before. Behind him, other. Valeri moved about a chamber that resembled a temple more than a bridge. Primitive humans, Zex began, his voice dripping with false authority. Your time of decision has come. Will you submit to the eternal wisdom of your gods, or choose the path of destruction? Jake stepped forward, clasping his hands behind his back. We've made our decision. Excellent, Zex replied, a smirk curling his lips. Your surrender will be broadcast across the galaxy as an example of wisdom. Prepare to transfer command of your vessel to our holy servants. You misunderstood, Jake said, his voice calm. We're not surrendering. The silence that followed was palpable. Jake could hear the hum of the Defiance's engines. Zex's black eyes widened, the first crack in his composure. What did you say? He asked, his voice faltering. I said we're not surrendering, Jake repeated. Humanity rejects your claim to divinity. We don't bow to bullies, no matter how fancy their light shows are. Behind Zex, other Valeri froze, their faces a mix of confusion and shock. This is impossible, Zex muttered to his crew. No species has ever refused after witnessing our divine power. First time for everything, Amy said from her station, a grin tugging at her lips. You dare mock the divine? Zex growled, his voice trembling with anger. Your ignorance will cost your species dearly. Our species has dealt with tyrants before, Jake replied evenly. Kings claiming divine right, emperors calling themselves gods, dictators above the law. None of them were gods either. Zex's glow intensified as rage consumed him. We are not mere tyrants. We have ruled for 10,000 years. Countless civilizations. Worship at our feet, because you murdered anyone who didn't, Pete called out. We've seen your burned worlds. Real gods don't rule through fear, silence. Zex roared, energy crackling around him. You will pay the price for blasphemy. Divine judgment will fall upon your pathetic world. You can try, Jake said simply, but you'll find humans fight hardest with their backs against the wall. Transmission ended abruptly. Through the viewports, Jake saw the Valeri fleet begin to move, their ships glowing with gathered power. Well, that could have gone better, Pete remarked dryly. Are you kidding? Amy said, grinning fiercely. Did you see his face when the captain said we wouldn't bow? I don't think anyone's ever said no to them before, Pete agreed. Doctor, Ryan Cooper looked up from the science station. Captain, I've been analyzing their ships. Their technology's impressive, but predictable. What do you mean? Jake asked. They're built for overwhelming primitive strong energy weapons. Tough shields, but limited maneuverability. They rely on brute force, not tactics. Lieutenant Tony Garcia nodded from the weapons console. Their attack patterns are straightforward. No creativity, just point and shoot. Jake felt a flicker of hope. So they're used to fighting scared. Primitives who can't hurt them. Exactly, Ryan confirmed. I don't think they've fought a real battle in centuries, maybe longer. Lisa entered the bridge, datapad in hand. Captain, I've been monitoring reactions from enslaved worlds. A refusal to surrender is causing a stir. Good stir or bad stir? Jake asked. Lisa admitted. Some species are terrified we've doomed the galaxy to divine wrath, Lisa said. But others? She smiled faintly. Others are asking questions they haven't dared to for generations. Questions like, what if they're not really gods? Kelly glanced up from her console. Captain, I'm detecting significant fleet movements across Valeri space. They're redeploying ships from garrison duty in multiple sectors. How many? Amy asked. At least 50 additional ships heading this way, Kelly replied. They're not just planning to destroy us, they want to make a spectacle of it, Amy observed. Jake nodded grimly. They need to make our destruction so devastating that no one else ever considers resistance. That means they'll bring everything they have, Pete noted. Good, Jake said, surprising his crew. If they're pulling ships from across their empire to deal with one human vessel, that means they're taking us seriously. And if they're taking us seriously, maybe we really do have a chance. Amy checked her tactical display. Estimated time for reinforcements to arrive. For days, assuming maximum speed. Jake looked around at his crew. These people had followed him into an impossible situation. Without hesitation, they deserved to know the stakes. For days to figure out how to beat an enemy undefeated for 10,000 years. For days to prove that being human means never giving up, no matter the odds. So, what's the plan, Captain? Amy asked. Jake smiled. For the first time since the Valeri appeared, he felt a surge of genuine confidence. We're going to show these false gods what happens when they mess with humanity. The Valeri fleet arrived like a storm of fire and lightning. 63 warships emerged from hyperspace around the outer colonies of human space, their hulls glowing with energy shields and brimming with divine fury. High Diver Zex had brought enough firepower to destroy a dozen worlds. Captain, Jake Morrison, watched from the bridge of the Defiance as the human fleet assembled. 12 ships total, the most the outer colonies could muster on short notice, stood against. The Valeri is 63, each alien vessel larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. This is Admiral Blake to all ships, came a voice over the comms. Stay tight, stay focused, and remember what we're fighting for. Jake recognized the voice of Commander Sandra Blake, promoted to Field Admiral for this battle. She commanded the carrier USS Freedom, leading a mixed force of destroyers, frigates, and fighter squadrons. All ships, enemy is moving into attack formation, Amy reported from Tactical. They're not even trying to be subtle, just a straight-line advance. Jake nodded. Exactly as Dr. Cooper predicted. They're used to enemies who run or surrender, not those who fight back. The first shots came from the Valeri flagship massive energy beams that illuminated space like artificial suns. The destroyer, USS Liberty, closest to the blast, absorbed the hit on its forward shields and kept flying. Liberty reports shields down to 60%. But all systems are operational, Kelly announced. Return fire, all ships, Admiral Blake ordered. Human fleet opened up with everything they had. Missiles, plasma cannons, railguns, and lasers, all focused on the Valeri-led ships. The alien shields flared and sparked but held firm. Their shields are strong, Tony Garcia reported from weapons. Captain, look, he gestured to the tactical display. They're not adjusting their formation at all. Jake watched. As the Valeri ships continued their straight-line advance, firing energy weapons in predictable, uncreative patterns, all human ships, execute Delta 7, Admiral Blake commanded. Jake smiled as he watched the human fleet scatter into what appeared to be chaos. Ships broke formation, moving in seemingly random directions. But it was calculated, controlled chaos, positioning them to create crossfire from multiple angles. The alien fleet hesitated, clearly unprepared for such a tactic. In that brief pause, human fighter squadrons launched from the Freedom and began their attack runs. This is Dragon Leader to all fighters, came the voice of Admiral Sandra Blake herself, now piloting a fighter instead of commanding from the bridge. Hit them fast and pull back. Don't try to be heroes, Admiral Blake's voice commanded. The fighters dove toward the Valeri ships like angry wasps, unleashing missiles and strafing fire before darting away. The aliens struggled to track them with heavy weapons, but the fighters were too small and agile. Enemy ship taking damage, Amy reported, excitement rising in her voice. The cruiser on their left flank, its shields are flickering. Jake, watched as 3 human ships concentrated their fire on the damaged Valeri vessel. For the first time in millennia, an alien godship was bleeding, but the Valeri adapted quickly. Their formations tightened, and they began firing in overlapping patterns that forced the human fighters to retreat. 2 human ships caught in the crossfire, Kelly said quietly. The USS Courage and USS Defiant, gone. Jake felt the loss, like a punch to the gut. Good people, friends gone, in an instant. Yet their sacrifice had proven something critical. Amy, did you see that? Jake asked. Yes, sir, Amy replied. When we damaged their ship, the energy readings from the others spiked. It diverted power to maintain its shields. They're connected somehow. Dr. Cooper spoke up from the science station. Captain, I believe their fleet shares power through an energy network. If we disrupt it, Jake finished, we can bring down their shields. Jake opened the comms. All ships, this is Defiance. Target the damaged cruiser with everything you've got. The human fleet concentrated its fire on the wounded Valeri ship. Its shields sparked and flashed before collapsing entirely. Human weapons tore through the alien hull, triggering explosions that lit the void. The cruiser broke apart and died, taking 300 Valeri crew with it, across the galaxy. On countless enslaved worlds, people watched in awe as their so-called gods bled and died like mortal beings. The impossible had happened. The divine Valeri could be killed. Impossible. Zex's voice thundered over the comms. This cannot be. We are eternal. We are divine. You're mortal, Jake replied simply. Just like everyone else. The battle raged for 2 more hours. Humans fought with desperate ingenuity, using every trick they could muster. They lost 6 more ships, but managed to destroy 4 Valeri vessels and damage a dozen others. Finally, with only 6 human ships left operational, Admiral Blake ordered a retreat. The surviving vessels jumped to hyperspace, leaving the Valeri fleet behind. But something had changed. The Valeri no longer appeared invincible. Their formation was ragged, their ships bore visible damage, and their crews looked shaken. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Valeri had faced a real battle-land while they had won. The price they paid was evident. Captain Lisa Hayes said quietly, I'm monitoring communications across the galaxy. The enslaved worlds saw everything. What are they saying? Jake asked. They're asking questions, sir.
Questions like,
if the gods can bleed, are they really gods at all? Jake stared at the stars, knowing that somewhere out, their seeds of rebellion were being sown. Good, he said simply. Let them ask questions. That's how revolutions begin. The news spread like wildfire. On the industrial world of Cathmar, miners whispered about the human ships that made their gods bleed. On Thorak Prime, farmers gazed at the night sky and wondered if their divine masters could be defeated. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his quarters aboard the Defiance, reading intelligence reports from Lisa Hayes. The pattern was unmistakable. Rebellion was beginning to ignite across the Valeri Empire. Captain, you need to see this, Lisa said, entering his cabin with a datapad. The Valeri are losing control. Jake examined the reports. Unexful dock workers refused to load tribute ships. On Zephyr Station, scientists were secretly researching forbidden technologies. Across the Empire, small acts of defiance were spreading. What's the Valeri response? Jake asked. Lisa's expression darkened. They're panicking. She displayed intercepted reports. They're destroying cities for even minor acts of rebellion. On Kepler 7, they wiped out 1 million people because someone scrawled anti-Valeri graffiti on a temple wall. They're making it worse, Jake realized. The more brutal they get, the more people see them as tyrants, not gods. Exactly, Lisa confirmed. And Captain, there's more. We've intercepted military communications. The Valeri are arguing among themselves about how to respond. Jake raised an eyebrow. Gods having arguments? Lisa nodded. Their High Council is split. Some want to destroy Earth immediately as an example, while others argue it would make them look weak, like they're afraid of humans. A few are even suggesting negotiation. Before Jake could respond, The ship's comm system crackled. "Morrison to the bridge. Priority message incoming." Jake hurried to the bridge, finding his crew gathered around the comm station. Ensign Kelly Wright looked both excited and nervous. "Captain, we're receiving a message from the thorax system." "It's not from the Valeriates, from the thorax themselves." "Put it through," Jake ordered. The screen flickered, revealing a creature resembling a cross between a bear and a lizard. Its brown fur streaked with gray, and its intelligent eyes spoke of ancient wisdom, humans of the ship Defiance. The creature said, its voice translated by the computer. "I am Elder Corvash of the Thorax Council. We have watched your battle with the false gods, and for the first time in 3 centuries, we have hope." Jake stepped forward. "Elder Corvash, I'm Captain Morrison. We're honored by your message, Captain." "Morrison, we must tell you something important. The Valeria are not what they claim. We have hidden records from before their rule." "What kind of records?" Jake asked. "The Valeri came to our world 600 years ago," Corvash said. "They were not gods then, just another starfaring race with technology we couldn't match. They used it to conquer us, and, over time, created the myth of their divinity. To control us, Dr. Alex Turner, who had joined them on the bridge, leaned forward with interest. "Elder, we've been studying captured technology. Can you tell us anything about their biology?" "Yes," Corvash replied. "They live longer than most species, perhaps 1,000 of your years, but they are not immortal. They can be killed, as you have proven, and their power is not limitless. Their technology has weaknesses." Commander Pete Collins spoke up. "What kind of weaknesses?" "Their ships require enormous energy to maintain weapons and shields," Corvash explained. "They must return to their homeworlds regularly to recharge. And, Captain Morrison, they have never faced an enemy that can learn and adapt as quickly as your species." Jake felt a surge of hope. Elder Corvash are there. Others, like U.S. species, willing to resist. "There are some," Corvash said. "The Kaithmari have been secretly building weapons for decades. The Zephyrians are developing new technologies in hidden labs. But we have all been too afraid to act." "What changed?" Ike asked. "You?" Did Corvash said simply. "When you made their ships bleed, you showed us the Valeri can be defeated. For the first time in centuries, we have hope." Alarms suddenly blared across the Defiance. Amy Baker looked up from her console, alarmed. "Captain, multiple fleets are moving toward Earth. It looks like they're planning a massive assault." "Massive?" Jake asked. "Over 200 ships, sir." "They're pulling vessels from across their empire," Amy replied. Corvash's image reappeared. "Captain, they are desperate. They know if humanity survives, their empire will crumble. They will throw everything they have at your world." Jake looked around the bridge, where the hum of systems underscored the silence. 200 Valeri. "Ships," he said quietly, "against whatever forces we can gather. It'll be the greatest battle in galactic history." "Elder Corvash," Jake continued, "if we're making our stand at Earth, we could use all the help we can get." The alien leader was silent for a moment before nodding. "Captain Morrison, the Thorax, have 12 warships hidden in asteroid fields. They are old, but they still fly. If you are willing to fight for freedom, so are we." "Sir," Kelly interrupted, "messages are coming in from other systems, the Kaithmari, the Zephyrians, even smaller species. They're all offering help." Jake felt something he hadn't experienced in weeks. Genuine hope. The Valeri had spent millennia ruling through fear and the myth of divinity. Now, that myth was breaking, and the enslaved peoples of the galaxy were ready to fight. "Send a message to all human forces," Jake ordered. "Tell them to prepare for the battle of their lives, and to our new allies. Let them know it's time to show the galaxy what happens when free beings stand together against tyranny." The greatest battle in galactic history was about to begin. Earth's skies burned with the light of war. 200 Valeri warships hovered above humanity's homeworld, their hulls glowing with divine fury. Against them stood the largest human fleet ever assembled, 60 ships of every class, from massive battleships to nimble fighters. But humanity was not alone. Jake stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching as ships from a dozen species took position alongside the human fleet. Thorax vessels, shaped like flying mountains, sleek Cathimeri destroyers, and ethereal Zepyrian ships that bent light around them all stood ready. Allied forces report ready, Captain Kelly announced, her voice steady despite the tension in her shoulders. Signal from the Valeri flagship, Amy reported. A diver. Zex is demanding an audience. Put him through, Jake ordered. Zexo's face appeared on the main screen, but he looked different now. His skin no longer glowed with divine light, and his black eyes held something Jake had never seen before in a Valeri: fear. Humans, Zexo began, his voice lacking its usual godly echo. You have poisoned the galaxy with your rebellion. You have turned our faithful servants against their rightful gods. Showed them the truth, Jake replied calmly, that you're not gods at all. Silence. Zexo roared, though his voice cracked, spoiling the effect. We will destroy your world and every ship that stands with you. The galaxy will learn what happens to those who defy the divine order. Then come and try, Jake said simply. The transmission cut off, and the Valeri fleet began to move. Immediately. Their ships formed a massive wedge formation, the same tactic they had relied on for thousands of years. No creativity, no adaptation, just brute force. All ships execute Alpha 7. Admiral Blake commanded from the flagship USS Enterprise. The Allied fleet scattered like seeds in the wind. Human ships dove low while thorac vessels climbed high. Cathimeri destroyers darted between larger ships like wolves in a hunt, and Zephyrian craft vanished from sensors, reappearing behind enemy lines. The Valeri hesitated again, unprepared for such coordination among so many species. Seizing the moment, the Allied fleet struck. Target their command ship, Jake ordered. Everything we've got. The Defiance led the charge, flanked by 6 ships from 3 different species. Weapons fire lit up the void as they closed. The distance, taking hits from Valeri energy beams but refusing to fall back, shields down to 30%. Pete Collins reported from engineering. We're almost in range. Ramming speed, Jake commanded. Amy turned to him in shock. Captain, you heard me, Jake said firmly. We're going to board that ship. Defiance surged forward, dodging energy beams and missile strikes, until it smashed through the flagship's shields and into its docking bay. Emergency systems sealed the breach as the hull groaned under the impact. Boarding party, go. Maria Santos shouted, leading her Marines through the airlock. Jake followed, plasma rifle in hand. The Valeri flagship resembled a temple with tall columns and walls covered in glowing religious symbols. But beneath the grandeur was still just a ship operated by mortals who could bleed and die. The fighting was fierce but short. The Valeri wielded powerful energy weapons, but they were unprepared for close combat. The human Marines, trained precisely for this kind of warfare, cut through their defenses with ruthless efficiency. Jake found Zexo on the so-called Holy Bridge, surrounded by the bodies of his fallen guards. The high diver stood alone, energy crackling around his trembling hands. Fear shone clearly in his black eyes. Impossible, Zexo whispered, his voice shaking. How can mere mortals defeat the divine? Because we're not alone, Jake said, raising his rifle. And because gods don't exist. Zexo raised his glowing hands, gathering energy for one final attack. But Lieutenant Chris Adams would follow Jake onto the bridge, fired. First, the plasma bolt struck the alien leader square in the chest. Zexo crumpled to the deck. The high diver, supreme leader of the Valeri Empire, died like any mortal. No divine light, no ascension to the heavens. Just a lifeless body collapsing to the floor. This is Captain Morrison to all ships, Jake announced over the comm system. The high diver is dead. I repeat, their leader is dead. The effect on the Valeri fleet was instantaneous. The impact was immediate and devastating. Valeri ships began retreating in disarray as the news spread. Some continued fighting, but without coordination or purpose, while others simply ceased moving, their crews too shocked to function. Across the galaxy, on countless enslaved worlds, people watched as their so-called gods fled in defeat. For 10 millennia, the divine rulers of the galaxy had seemed invincible. Now, They were beaten by a coalition of species they had dismissed as primitive. "Captain," Kelly reported, "we're receiving surrender signals from multiple Valeri ships." Jake looked out at the battles still raging around Earth. The war was far from over, but something fundamental had shifted. The myth of Valeri divinity was shattered forever. "Accept their surrenders," Jake ordered, "and send a message to every world in the galaxy. The false gods are dead, and the galaxy is free." Through the bridge windows, Jake could see human and alien ships working together to secure the remaining Valeri vessels. It was the beginning of a new age, one where no species would ever again bow to false gods. The galaxy now belonged to the free. 6 months after the battle for Earth, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of a space station orbiting Thorak Prime. Through the viewport, he watched ships from dozens of species working together. To rebuild what the Valeri had destroyed, human engineers collaborated with Cathmary technicians, while Zephyrian scientists shared knowledge with Thorak researchers. The Valeri Empire had collapsed faster than anyone expected. Once their divine Facade was shattered, rebellions erupted across their former territories. Most Valeri ships had surrendered without a fight, their crews too shaken by their leader's death to resist. "Captain Morrison." Came a familiar voice. Jake turned to see Elder Corvash approaching. The Thorak leader moved with a cane, but his energy seemed renewed. Elder Corvash, Jake greeted with a smile. "How are the reconstruction efforts progressing?" "Better than we dared to hope," Corvash replied, joining Jake at the viewport. "For the first time in 6 centuries, my people are free to learn, to grow, to reach for the stars once more." Jake nodded, observing a group of young Thorak engineers studying a human ship design. "What will your people do now?" "What we always dreamed of doing," Corvash said, a hint of wonder in his voice. "Explore. Discover." We had nearly forgotten what it was like to dream of tomorrow, instead of fearing it. Commander Janet Mills approached, a datapad in hand. As Defiance's diplomatic officer, she had worked tirelessly to establish the fledgling Galactic Alliance. "Captain," she said, "I have the latest updates from the War Crimes Tribunals." Jake accepted the pad and scanned the reports. "Another 50 Valeri commanders convicted," Mills added, "for their roles in the slave empire." The trials had been grueling but essential. While not all Valeri had been active participants in the empire's atrocities, justice demanded accountability for those who were. "What about the others?" Jake asked. "The ones who weren't involved in the worst crimes?" "Most are cooperating with the reconstruction efforts," Janet replied. "They're sharing their technology and helping undo the damage their empire caused. Some have even asked to join the new alliance as equal members." "Equal members, Elder," Corvash repeated, savoring the words. "No gods, no subjects, just free beings working together." Through the station's communication system came an announcement. "All personnel, please report to the main assembly hall for the alliance ceremony." Jake, Corvash, and Janet made their way to the grand hall at the station center. Representatives from 47 different species had gathered to sign the charter that would formally establish the Galactic Freedom Alliance. No single species would lead it, and no one would claim divine authority over others. Admiral Sandra Blake stood at the podium, still in her flight suit from a recent patrol mission. She had refused promotions to desk jobs, choosing to remain a fighter for freedom. "Friends," she began, her voice resonating through the hall. 6 months ago, we were strangers, scattered across the galaxy and oppressed by false gods. Today, we stand together as equals, united in our commitment to freedom and justice." Jake watched as representatives stepped forward to sign the charter. The Thorak delegation used ancient ceremonial claws. The Cathmary wielded energy pens that left glowing marks, and the Zephyrians signed with devices that bent light into written words. When it was time for humanity to sign, Admiral Blake gestured toward Jake. "Captain Morrison, would you do the honors?" Jake felt a wave of surprise and pride as he stepped forward. Taking the simple pen, he signed his name beneath the others, not as a conqueror or a liberator, but as an equal partner in the galaxy's new future. "The Galactic Freedom Alliance is now officially established," Admiral Blake announced. The hall erupted in cheers, growls, clicks, and other celebratory sounds from dozens of species. Later, as the ceremony wound down, Jake stood on the observation deck with his senior officers. Amy Baker and Pete Collins, now captains themselves, had stayed for the ceremony. "So, what's next, Captain?" Amy asked. Jake gazed out at the stars, where Alliance ships prepared for exploration missions to the galaxy's unknown regions. "We explore, we learn, and we make sure no one ever again has to bow to false gods." Dr. Alex Turner joined them, holding a medical scanner. "Captain, I've been studying biological samples from various species. Did you know that, despite our evolutionary differences, we all share certain basic genetic markers? We really are all connected." "Makes sense," Pete said. "We all want the same things: freedom, safety for our families, and the chance to build something better." Kelly Wright, now a full lieutenant, looked up from her communication device. "Captain, we've received reports from the galaxy's edge. 3 new species have requested contact with the Alliance. They heard about our victory over the Valeri and want to join." Jake smiled. "Send them an invitation. The more friends we have, the stronger we all become." As the twin suns of the Thorax system set behind the planet, Jake reflected on how much had changed. The galaxy was no longer ruled by fear or false divinity. Instead, it was guided by cooperation, mutual respect, and the truth that all intelligent beings deserve freedom. The USS Defiance was being refitted for a new mission, exploring the uncharted regions beyond Valeri space. Rumors spoke of other empires and challenges out there, but Jake wasn't worried. Humanity and its allies had proven that no tyrant was too powerful to defeat and no god too mighty to challenge. The galaxy belonged to the free,